Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to take a look at some of the more interesting features of the latest polling this week, including on the success of the Tories' latest culture wars, as well as the results showing that Rishi Sunak is actually more popular when he's hiding away in Disneyland than in the country talking to the public. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I'm going to be picking out a few features from the polls this last week from both YouGov and Omnisus. One interesting result is that Sunak seems to have boosted his approval rating as Prime Minister by 3 points. Well, I'm sure he'll be pleased with that. That's good, isn't it? Only the fieldwork was done yesterday and the day before, so it's really up to date, right? And it's like you think, but he's been on holiday in America with his family this week. So he hasn't been making any public statements. So his approval rating has gone up 3 points, which is really good for him, when he hasn't been saying anything. So this poll would suggest that he's more popular when he's out of the country, not opening his mouth, than in Downing Street talking to the public. I don't think this bodes well for him when he comes back and starts talking again, does it? I'm not sure I'd ever really considered the concept before, but if there was ever a case of a politician seeing their approval rating improve and it not be a good thing, well, this is it. I mean, seriously, it'd be absolutely hilarious if it goes back down after his next public statement. Still, although Sunak was on holiday, he had left the political narrative in the capable hands of Lee Anderson, Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick. So how did that go? Well, Omnisus now have Labour 2 points further ahead of the Tories compared with when Sunak was last in the country. Yeah, I don't think it's going well for them. Although asylum had captured the headlines this week, it's worth pointing out Sunak had been spending the time since the recent Westminster by-elections focusing on environmental policies. I thought at the time, is this wise? But let's have a look at how that's going. So in Omnisus again, they've been asking about that. 62% of the public say they would most trust Labour to protect and improve the environment, to 38% saying the Conservatives. Purely between the two, of course. I mean, there will be some who think other parties would be better, but in terms of the two who can realistically form a government. Nonetheless, those results are really odd. I mean, you can look at the 38% for the Conservatives and go, well, they're clearly, it's clear that only a minority trust them and a majority would much more trust Labour. But it's still an odd statistic. Given that this pollster has the Conservatives on 24% of the vote, it's remarkable to think that must mean there's 14% of people who won't vote Conservative, but they trust them on environmental matters more than Labour. As if, oh yeah, the Tories are absolutely great for the environment. Oh, well, why won't you vote for them then? Oh no, it's just everything else they're bad at. Oh, but on the environment, they're great. People are funny bunnies at times. But nonetheless, not a great boost for the Tories' green credentials. And just to hammer the point home, the poll asked people what they thought the UK should focus on in terms of energy security. See, the Tories are trying to say, oh no, for energy security, we need more oil, you see. Well, only 10% of the public think new oil. Only 12% think oil of any kind. Solar, wind, even nuclear considered way more important than oil. And it's really this simple. Every time I see a poll which touches on the subject of people's attitudes to energy on the environment, and they always come at it from different angles, but no matter how many times you look at a poll, no matter how they phrase it, it shows that the anti-net zero crowd simply are not in tune with the public. That Sunak, although he's not explicitly arguing against net zero, he insists he's fully committed to net zero, but he's nonetheless pursuing policies which are clearly working against it. That is a huge strategic error. In fact, although he tried to conflate ULEZ with environmental matters, he was also attempting to make car use a wedge issue for the next election. Oh, it worked in Uxbridge, and it's like, well, it sort of works in a binary sense in that you retained the seat, but your majority was cut down to 500. So it's quite, Oh, no, ULEZ was the thing. How can we use this nationally? Right, we'll make car use a wedge issue. So how's that going? Well, I've not seen specific polls on this, which is a shame. I'd really like to. But we can infer some things from general attitudes. So on YouGov, they have a tracker which looks at most important issues, policy areas. It gets updated quite regularly. It was updated last week, so it's up to date. And we can see, when a political party is trying to make a particular policy a big thing, we can see if there's any sort of change in this polling. That is a sort of clumsy way of allowing to see if there's any cut through to voters, if they're reprioritising policies, right? Now, since the by-elections, there has been a jump up in priority for the environment amongst voters in general. Now, this thing does tend to go up and down quite a bit, but it's gone up since the Tories have tried to focus attention on it. So, okay, but this could be good or bad for the Conservatives, because people who think that environmental policy is important can either be pro or anti-environment. In terms of Conservative voters compared to Labour voters, the jump was much smaller amongst Conservatives than Labour. It was also at a much lower overall level. So it's not looking like the sort of policy area where Sunak should really be focusing his efforts. When we talk about Conservative voters in these polls, it means 2019 Conservative voters. So that includes the chunk that Labour wants to, at the next election, either vote for them or stay at home. But Sunak was also very much linking it with car uses, particularly focusing on car use, motorists. So then you think, okay, well, that would feed into transport policy. So has there been a corresponding jump in the priority of transport policies then? No. No corresponding jump at all amongst Conservative voters thinking that transport is suddenly a more important policy issue, and it's an incredibly low level of priority, like only 2% of Conservative voters think it's an important issue. And you think to yourself, so even amongst Conservative voters, the voters that Sunak's chasing, because remember, Sunak doesn't need to appeal to new voters. He just needs to retain as many of the 2019 voters as he can. Almost every other policy area is considered more important than the environment. And as far as I can tell, absolutely every other policy area is considered at or above and much above importance with transport policy. It's the economy, healthcare and immigration. They're the ones considered important amongst Conservative voters. And remember that when people are deciding how to use their vote in a general election, they only get one tick or cross, whatever's your poison. They can't use a vote for each policy area. So even if Sunak persuaded most of the country that he was right on environmental and transport issues, which, by the way, it doesn't look like he is persuading them of that, but let's say he did, it doesn't actually win him many votes. If people are prioritising other policy areas, it's like, there could be loads of people going to the polling station going, I agree with Mr. Sunak on his transport policies, but I actually think there's more important things, so I'm going to vote Labour or Lib Dem or SNP or whoever. I would suggest the only important policy area to his target voters that he is pushing is immigration. And the news on that front's not really good for him. Bit of a double-edged sword, really, when they push that. I always think they're tempting fate. Because whenever he ramps up the rhetoric on immigration, or one of his ministers does, especially asylum, mostly when you notice, they really focus on asylum, which is a tiny proportion of overall immigration. Tiny. But people do start to think the issue is more important. It works. They get people to think, oh yeah, it's more important. But the news is always that of failure. And remember that even his deputy chair said that the government had failed on immigration on TV this week. So it's more likely to push those voters to support someone else than to persuade them to vote Conservative. The Conservatives are persuading them that it's an important policy area, but they're not persuading them that they're the right party to deal with it. It's backfiring. In fact, the economy, healthcare and immigration, they are the top three policy areas for those 2019 Conservative voters. And with the public strongly of the view that the government are doing poorly in all three areas, I'm not sure that Sunak has been well advised in putting all of his effort into focusing on a much lower priority policy area where the public also think he's doing badly on it. So if I take a look at all the data I have available, I'm really not seeing any signs of danger that Sunak is making headway with his latest pivot. And I said recently, sometime this autumn, it wouldn't surprise me if he decided to have another reset and change strategy yet again. This is already his third strategy. He hasn't even been Prime Minister for a year yet. The first was his 5 pledges at the start of the year. When he became Prime Minister, he monkeyed about for a couple of months. Then at the start of the year, it's right, this is what we're going to do, my 5 pledges. Then that started to do very badly. So then the second was his push for the UK to become this new technology powerhouse. We're going to turn Cambridge into the new Silicon Valley. That sort of fizzled out. Again, there was something in the news last week, but mostly the news is, yeah, the problem is that you're not letting us build this super technology hub because you're not letting us build the houses we need, for example. So that's fizzled out. The third was the focus on motoring and new oil. Apart from anything else, it just looks chaotic. And every time he changes strategy, and it's like, if you're pursuing a wrong strategy, yes, you should change it. But shouldn't you put more effort into making sure it's the right strategy? He's just reacting. It's very reactive. There's no thought in it. And every time he changes strategy, he makes it look more obvious to more and more of the public that he hasn't got a long-term plan because he keeps changing the plan every few months. And it's like I say, it's not like he's picking the right strategies either. It's not like he's going to a better strategy. It's just a different one where he's also failing. So in the next 6 months, he's either going to be forced to look chaotic and adopt a new strategy for a 4th time, or stick with a provably bad one and look incompetent. Of course, it is possible to look both chaotic and incompetent, but I can't imagine his MPs will be happy with that look. They are already facing the reality that they will lose half their seats. I think they'd rather not lose 2/3 of them. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.